What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. Former UFC Middleweight Champ and current #1 contender Robert Whittaker, 21-5, versus #3 contender Jared Cannonier, 13-4. This fight will likely determine champion Israel Adesanya's next title defense. So Robert Whittaker is back in the cage for the third time within a calendar year and only 3 months since his 5-round decision win over Darren Till in Whittaker's comeback fight after losing his title versus Adesanya. And over time, it's feeling more and more like Whittaker's KO loss versus Adesanya a year ago was a necessary and almost inevitable step for a wounded champ to truly make his return to the cage and to eventually work himself back into form, because I firmly believe that those two close 5-round decision wins versus Yoel Romero that earned Whittaker the title also did irreparable damage to him because of their extended brutality, especially in that second fight. Neither Whittaker nor Romero would return to the cage for more than a year following their rematch. Then Whittaker suffered a serious health issue just before his scheduled title defense against Kelvin Gastelum, causing the fight to be canceled and further prolonging Whittaker's post-Romero inactivity. He finally returns to the cage, and since the UFC doesn't really do tune-up fights, especially for current champions, Whittaker's title defense was against Israel Adesanya, the next man up, who just knocked off previous #1 contender Kelvin Gastelum via close decision in that competitive and dramatic classic. So this is one hell of a comeback opponent for Robert Whittaker, right? I didn't feel good about it going in. Whittaker got dropped and basically knocked out in the first round, got saved by the bell, then got dropped again and finished in the second. So then Izzy becomes the new king of the middleweights. But instead of taking a long layoff, Whittaker then commits to fighting Jared Cannonier, then pulled out of the fight due to personal reasons. He said it was just due to burnout, so that fight's canceled. So then there are all types of questions about Robert Whittaker's fighting future, between the rough fights with Romero, the long layoff, the serious intestinal illness, the knockout loss of the title to Izzy, the burnout, the personal issues. It wasn't looking great. But then he commits to fighting Darren Till just a couple months later, who'd moved up from 170 and looked great in his divisional debut in the 3-round decision win versus Kelvin Gastelum on that Nate Diaz versus Jorge Masvidal BMF undercard. Damn, Gastelum's really getting kicked around in this one, huh? So Whittaker, whose career is looking more vulnerable than ever, takes on a Darren Till, who the UFC's been pushing as a potential superstar for some time now, and who's got some real momentum going at 185 now, and Whittaker wins that fight via decision. So now he's getting right back to work, and he remakes the fight with Jared Cannonier, who in his last fight beat the guy who I think is the dark horse of the division, Jack Hermansson. Cannonier devastated Hermansson via TKO. Hermansson is a former Greco-Roman wrestler who's become the division's scariest submission artist, but whose stand-up game is also improving a lot. He recently beat an aging Jacare Souza via decision, mostly in the stand-up. And Jared Cannonier's last fight was a knockout of that guy. Jared's also got one of the more interesting paths to UFC elite that you'll find, almost reminiscent of Houston Alexander from back in the day, in that Jared is a very late comer to mixed martial arts. And not late as in, well, in his past career, he was a pro kickboxer like Israel Adesanya, or an Olympic silver medalist and several-time world champion wrestler like Yoel Romero. No, Jared Cannonier worked in air traffic control in Alaska and didn't even begin an amateur MMA career until he was 27 years old. And by amateur, I mean just regional scene in Alaska. 27, that's one hell of an age to pick up something that's as skill-based as professional fighting, right? Especially in mixed martial arts, where the practitioners have a variance of expertise. Some are expert strikers, others Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specialists, you've got wrestlers, all of these different backgrounds where they then try to work towards rounding out their game, strengthening their weaker areas. Cannonier doesn't have any of this expertise-building fight background, but he has a few amateur or regional fights in Alaska, winning all of those by knockout or submission, and then he joins the UFC in 2016 as a heavyweight, gets knocked out in his debut against Sean Jordan. Nothing like those welcome to the UFC ass-kickings, huh? Then Cannonier wins his next 2 fights, one of those versus increasingly popular fighter Ion Cutelaba. Cannonier then moves to light heavyweight, loses to Glover Teixeira in a 3-rounder where he was taken down and kept down in each round by about as experienced a fighter as you'll come across, who just knows how to win, even today at 40, 41 years old. Glover Teixeira is always serious business. So Jared then loses 2 of his next 3 fights versus the 2 guys who actually just fought for the light heavyweight title. Jan Blachowicz, the current champ, beat Jared by decision, and then Dominic Reyes knocked Jared out in the first. And this is before people really cared about Blachowicz or even really cared about Dominic Reyes. He was still like on the upswing. So now it's looking really bad for Cannonier. He's not getting it done at heavy. He didn't get it done at light heavy. Plus he's in his mid-30s. So what does he do? He drops weight again to middleweight, 185, and then goes on a 3-fight win streak, all via TKO, versus David Branch, the aging legend, all-time legend, Anderson Silva, whose leg Jared injured with a leg kick in a fight that I thought Jared was winning even before the TKO injury stoppage. Silva, by the way, hasn't fought in the year and a half since, although he's now finally scheduled to fight Uriah Hall in a couple of weeks in what's supposed to be an Anderson Silva send-off retirement fight, although we'll see, right? And following that win over Anderson Silva was the TKO win over Jack Hermansson in a fight where Hermansson was actually a 2-1 to 3-1 favorite over Cannonier. In fact, Cannonier has been the betting underdog in each of his last 4 fights. He was a 3-1 underdog when he knocked out David Branch. And in this upcoming fight versus former champ Robert Whittaker, Jared is once again the betting underdog, although this is actually the closest to even money that he's been out of any of those previous 4. This is actually damn near a 50-50 fight betting-wise, which I find very interesting and tells me that people still have doubts on whether Robert Whittaker is back at the level that he was at before those back-to-back Yoel Romero wars. So this is very interesting in that Cannonier hasn't lost a fight at middleweight, and the types of guys who have stopped Cannonier were either the Ben Rothwell-built heavyweight sluggers like Sean Jordan in Jared's UFC debut, or a tall 6'4" Dominic Reyes, who's an elite southpaw striker with knockout power. Whittaker is neither of these fighter types, but he is a very accurate combination puncher who has kind of an ambush style where he'll bounce around the outside and will then jump into exchanges, which actually costed him versus Izzy, but usually it works to Robert's advantage. One thing that I'll say about Whittaker's latest win versus Darren Till that somehow is kind of lost in the larger narrative is that Darren Till clearly injured his leg during that fight, and he wasn't able to move the same from the second round onward. Now, this injury did appear to be the result of an oblique kick from Whittaker where you kick downward at the knee. Till actually used that same technique against Wonderboy Thompson in their fight. John Jones does it all the time. And if it lands cleanly, it could really tear your knee up. So it's not like this was some undeserved win due to freak injury. This was all the handiwork of Whittaker. But that first round and a half before the injury had me thinking that Till really had a good shot at beating Whittaker. The kick changed the fight, and Whittaker got his hand raised via decision. Now, Whittaker and Cannonier are both 5'11". I'd have to say Whittaker is the more skilled boxer between the two and the much more experienced in successfully controlling distance. And Whittaker's obviously a true championship-level talent, but something about this matchup says that Whittaker's willingness to often hang around in the pocket during those long exchanges, it tells me that this fight's result might simply be a matter of who catches who upside the head with the hook first. Now, Whittaker should be able to better navigate those dangerous waters based on who he's already been in the cage with, but Cannonier might be the more naturally gifted athlete, perhaps. Maybe not in terms of the foot speed. Whittaker's got excellent foot speed, the way that he does kind of bounce around inside and outside of the pocket, but perhaps in hand speed and almost certainly in punching power. Now, the fighters who've done the most damage to Whittaker, besides the wrecking ball Yoel Romero, are taller counter-strikers like Israel Adesanya and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, who are actually the last 2 people to beat Whittaker, 5 years apart. Damn, think about that, 5 years. Whittaker won 9 fights between the Wonderboy loss at 170 and then the Israel Adesanya championship loss at 185. That's a hell of a streak. But Cannonier isn't necessarily the counter-punching marksman that either of them are. He does have punching power and also some crisp, hard leg kicks. He's also recently shown the ability to wrestle and to work himself off the mat when he was taken down by Hermansson. Although he probably won't need much of that versus Whittaker unless Whittaker finds himself in dire straits in the stand-up. I could be wrong at that, but I think Whittaker wants to keep it on the stand-up. but he's got more of the ability to make the ground game an issue than Cannonier, although Cannonier, like I said, did get up and has improved slightly in his wrestling. But I'm going to take Robert Whittaker here because Cannonier himself hasn't fought in over a year. He's now 36 years old, and he hasn't had to enter a third round since 2017 in a fight that he lost. I see there being more ways for Whittaker to win this fight. I don't see Cannonier beating Whittaker via decision unless he hurts Whittaker early and Whittaker's just hanging on and surviving from then on. I think he's got to put him away in order to win, although he did look really good against Silva before the stoppage, but that was still at the end of the first round. And that Cannonier-Silva fight also more so begs the question of how much Anderson Silva really even has left these days. So I'm not sure how much to make of Cannonier's performance there, but it's certainly not bad. Yeah, he did look really sharp against Silva. But anyway, in this fight, I really want to take somebody via knockout or stoppage. And I don't trust the 36-year-old relative newcomer, Jared Cannonier, to win a 3-rounder versus someone with this much experience. Whittaker might be battle-worn, but he's also still only 29 years old. Wow, that's crazy when you consider his fight history. So I want to say that this should end in a stoppage either way, but I think that Whittaker will mitigate risk once he feels that he could do enough to win rounds. I don't think he'll put his foot on the gas and show a ton of urgency in getting a stoppage. He didn't show a ton of that killer instinct versus Darren Till. I get it, that was a comeback fight versus a great fighter, and Whittaker clearly wanted to win that fight. But he didn't get overeager to press the issue, and this was against a badly hobbled Darren Till. But Whittaker did say after the fight that he wasn't even aware that Darren Till had injured his knee, which I thought was kind of interesting that he didn't pick up on the read, but that just also shows you that we as the viewers have a clearly different set of angles than the person who's directly in front of Darren Till. I do think that this Whittaker-Cannonier fight will be fought at a more feverish pace because it is a 3-rounder and you don't have to pace yourself in the same way that you would in a 5. So I'm taking the former champ, Robert Whittaker, via decision, despite Cannonier's knockout power and whatever remaining questions we have about whether Whittaker's back at peak performance level. I can even get a bit more specific in my speculation. Cannonier is older and is a pretty slow starter. Most of his recent stoppages have come in the second. I expect Whittaker to win the first round. I expect Cannonier to win the second round, maybe even hurt Whittaker pretty badly, drop him or wobble him. Then for Whittaker to show his experience and championship spirit and will win the third. Although in that case, if Cannonier beats up on Whittaker badly enough in the second, it could be a 2-point round, in which case you could theoretically have a draw as well. But I'm taking Whittaker by decision. I know that's ultra specific, but what the hell? If I actually take that more specific bet to Vegas and win, you might see a wall-sized fish tank in the background next time. But let me know your thoughts on this fight, and whether you think that Robert Whittaker could be a formidable threat to recapture the title in a rematch with Israel Adesanya. Also, the other top contender battle in this division is between number 4 contender Jack Hermansson and number 6 contender Darren Till. Who you got in that interesting matchup? I think I'm leaning Till in my initial thoughts, but I've got to look a little deeper at that one. But let me know what you think about it. Please leave your comments in the comments, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog, thanks for tuning in.